Mock draft time. I've wanted to hold off on big boards and mock drafts so I don't give too much away about how I feel about certain prospects, but here we are. The NBA regular season is over, so for this mock draft, I am simply going to take the reverse standings and run the draft that way. There's no tankathon, no odds. We're going by NFL rules. There were a few tiebreakers, so I've broken those myself. I've already got in-depth breakdowns on a lot of these guys over in my Heat Check series. Go check that out. So for the purposes of this video, I'm not going to be breaking them down as prospects, more so their fit with the teams that I'm drafting them for. I've drafted each of these players to the team that I really think I would pick if I was in their position, so I've put a lot of thought and genuine consideration into these picks. Since it's basically impossible that this will be the actual order come draft night 2023, this could be kind of a fun what if thing to look back on. So without further ado, let's get it. Based purely off the regular season standings, without a draft lottery, the Detroit Pistons would have been the lucky recipient of one French phenom, Victor Wembanyama. To this point, most of us know what Wemby is, so rather than getting into that, I'm going to specifically talk about his fit with the Pistons, which is interesting given that they just had another number one draft pick a few years ago in Cade Cunningham. For starters, I see Wembanyama as an offensive 3 and a shot blocking 4 in the league. Not that it matters all that much, but just so you get a clear picture of what I'm envisioning with Detroit. I think his fit alongside Cade Cunningham makes a ton of sense. Despite leading the LNB Pro A League in points at 21.3 per game, I don't know that I necessarily see Wembanyama carrying that kind of offensive load off the bat in the NBA. Eventually, most definitely, but I think there's an advantage to putting less immediate pressure on him and making him a second option or a 1B even early in his career, and playing off Cunningham would help accomplish that. In fact, I think that's a perfect 1A, 1B pairing for the foreseeable future. Both generally perimeter-oriented shot creators who can facilitate and play off others well, and have positional size just sounds like a nightmare for the opposition. Throw in a physical front court pairing in Jalen Duren to handle fives defensively and function in big actions offensively, as well as high rim pressure guard Jaden Ivey, and you're looking at an insane young core in Detroit. Scoot at number 2 to the San Antonio Spurs. Easy pick, easy fit. He's been a star for the G League Ignite in his few seasons there. He is a Tier 1, future perennial All-Star and potential superstar level talent. And the Spurs are in dire need of a lead player that can carry them into the promised land. And with San Antonio's developmental track record, that just might be where they're headed if they land the first or second pick. I really like their pieces: Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell, Jeremy Sohan, Malachi Branham, some of my favorite players from the 2022 draft, and all of those guys are able to impact the game off ball, which is great because Scoot is a true point guard and would have the ball a ton. Trey Jones is great. You could likely ship him off to a contender to bolster that already growing draft cash, and San Antonio has made out like a bandit this offseason. The Rockets desperately need guard depth, so if they were to land here at number 3, there's potential they just trade out of it or grab Amen Thompson, both of which I personally think would be a mistake. I just don't think Houston's current configuration is necessarily a recipe for success for a prospect who didn't put up incredible stats against competition in a league lower than collegiate and pro level ball. I think Miller here is the outright decision for anyone at number 3, and that includes Houston. At 6'9", he's essentially a perimeter-oriented combo guard. You're not going to see him described that way very often, if ever, but that's genuinely how I view him. Shooting 38% from 3 on 7.5 attempts, you can essentially plug him right in as a lengthy shooting guard, and I feel good enough about his rapidly increasing playmaking, pick and roll navigation, and general feel for the game to give him primary ball handling duties down the line too. I really buy his passing and playmaking upside, so much so that I feel pretty confident throwing him next to Jalen Green and Jabari Smith Jr. I really think he's the best player available here and could help Houston in a variety of ways, all while developing into a key piece that could eventually be a cornerstone of this Houston project. 4th overall, I have Charlotte selecting Jarace Walker out of Houston. Honestly, just another team I don't totally trust to properly develop a Thompson twin. I don't love their value here, so hopefully for their sake, on draft night they have some better luck. But I am a massive fan of Jarace Walker regardless. They got real buy-in defensively near the end of the season, and I think Walker is probably the best defensive prospect in this draft currently. I say that as a disclaimer before Wemby averages 4 blocks and 2 steals for his career, but I think that Walker has legit anchor and DPOY potential down the line. Offensively, he likely wouldn't be any major piece early, but he's got an untapped face-up game and projectable enough shooting that maybe, down the line, he could morph into a legitimate piece alongside LaMelo Ball. In the least, I think they need to take a player with little to zero bust ability, selecting this high for the first time in a few years. At number 5, I've drafted Anthony Black to the Portland Trail Blazers. I like Black's fit with most teams, but I especially like him with Portland. Firstly, he's one of the better connective pieces and perimeter defenders in the entire class. I don't care what stage your franchise is in, win now, rebuilding, everyone needs those two things. At 6'7", I think he could immediately slot into the starting lineup alongside both Damian Lillard and Anthony Simons, assisting both of them as a lightning-fast processor and facilitator, and an off-ball scoring threat, making timely cuts, and hitting a few threes here and there. Defensively, I think he'll be versatile enough to slot up to forwards here and there, making this kind of 3-guard lineup thing work. Most importantly, I think his fit next to Shaedon Sharpe as a potential future duo with the Blazers is a super intriguing one. Both of those guys learning the ins and outs under Dame for a few years before being handed the reins would be massive for their development. And that's a pair I'd be really excited about if I was a Blazers fan moving forward. Overall, I think Black would offer Portland more versatility on both the offensive and defensive end of the court, address some current problems, and offer them some future upside in the process. Probably my most unconventional pick here, but I have drafted Amen Thompson to Orlando with the 6th overall pick. Likely not who Magic fans want or are expecting, but I think Amen is a super intriguing addition to this jumbo forward-driven roster that Orlando is building. As I've alluded to already, I trust very few organizations to really develop Amen Thompson, but I think I feel secure enough in sending him to Orlando. Fit-wise, a lot of people see Amen as a point guard. I have a really hard time visualizing that early in his career. Down the line, with his generational first step and passing playmaking ability, sure. But that jump to the NBA, I think, is going to hit like a freight train. And that's the beauty of his fit with Orlando. With Markelle Fultz running point and essentially multiple point forward type guys, he wouldn't be relied on as a primary handler and could spend his first few seasons really feeling out the league while utilizing his elite athleticism alongside guys like Banchero and Wagner. It's unconventional, but what about this Magic roster is conventional? Alright, at number 7, I've drafted Taylor Hendricks of UCF to the Indiana Pacers. He's one of my favorite prospects in this draft, one of my top risers, and I really like his fit here. There's a lot of interesting directions that Indiana could go in 2023, but I like drafting a front court piece to play alongside Miles Turner, especially one that can really extend the floor next to Tyrese Halliburton. Hendricks is one of the better defenders in this class. He's extra switchable, and I really think he could be a defensive anchor for an NBA team one day. Not to mention, he scored 15 a game in college, shooting just shy of 40% from 3 on 5 attempts. Turner has been signed on for a few more years, and by the end of that extension, if they were to draft Hendricks, you could be looking at one of the better defensive front courts in the entire NBA, both of which can space the floor for Halliburton and Benedict Mather. It's not the flashiest pick, but that's a core I could really get excited for. Even more, I don't think we're looking at any sort of finished product for Hendricks. I think he can expand his off-the-dribble game even more at the next level. Alright, Cason Wallace at number 8 to the Washington Wizards. Honestly, I don't really know who to draft for Washington. They've retained a pretty middling core, they don't have a ton of direction. It's a tough ask. After their 2022 NBA draft, I've decided to go with a high floor pick and pairing defensive-minded Cason Wallace with Bradley Beal. I love Wallace's game. I think he turns into a really strong NBA player, and if the Wizards aren't looking to retool at all or actually give upside swings the time and development that they need, you might as well just take the best perimeter defender in the class and be done with it. 9th, I've selected Azar Thompson, the other half of the Thompson twin duo. I didn't really anticipate him falling this far, it's just kind of how the cookie crumbled. I really like him as a prospect and think he's both a surefire bet to be a high floor pick and offers plenty of upside as well. The Jazz are kind of in this weird in-between mode where they could have made a play-in push, they could have shut it down and opted towards a pick, and I feel like Azar kind of exemplifies that thought process. He offers both an immediate injection of defense and athleticism alongside the win now core, and potentially has this upside as a passer, playmaker, and creator waiting in the wings. I think it's a best of both worlds selection for Utah at number 9. Number 10, Villanova's Cam Whitmore to the Dallas Mavericks. If the Mavericks are committed to this heliocentric style of play around Luka Doncic, I think Whitmore makes a lot of sense here. As an explosive, hyper-athletic forward with above-the-rim prowess, I think Whitmore's athletically superior style and timely cutting would make him a potent off-ball threat in Dallas' system. He's not going to provide a ton in the ways of shooting or premier defense, at least in the short term, which are both huge needs for the Mavs, but I'd still rather take the big swing here and try to add that elsewhere. Whitmore's biggest weakness, his passing and playmaking, would be mitigated due to the gravitational pull of Doncic, and I think there would be a pathway towards him developing into some version of a number 2 or backup creator next to Luka. If any of that Luka magic rubbed off on Whitmore in his early years, you could be looking at a monster 5 years down the line. Similarly to a few other selections here, I just think Whitmore offers both short-term attributes that Dallas might be looking for, in addition to being a high upside swing that they could fall back on should things go south with the current configuration. Probably the one I least believe will happen, Oklahoma City hasn't shown in their 15-year history to ever value shooters this high, but I think Grady Dick would be a really fun weapon to incorporate into this Thunder squad. At 6'8", Dick has premier, elite, uncanny shooting ability, 40% on nearly 6 attempts per game, with a ton of variety intermingled into his shot diet. He's got a pretty quick-fire release, flies off screens, and can knock it down with ease. And with Oklahoma City loading up on jumbo playmakers in recent years, SGA, Giddey, Jalen Williams, potentially even Chet Holmgren down the line, having a guy like Grady who won't need the ball in his hands to score and make an impact would be massive. We've already seen Isaiah Joe drastically increase the talent level on this team. Adding another strong shooter to the ranks, I think, would do wonders for this OKC team. He's also got quite a bit more to his game than just shooting, and I think a lot of people gloss over that. He's a good at-rim finisher, sneakily athletic. He'll be a great player wherever he lands. From what I've seen, Magic fans are going to be pretty disappointed if they don't leave with Grady Dick as their second draft pick, but despite not having that positional size that Orlando has looked for in recent years, I think Keontae George's fit in the backcourt would be a great one. We've seen far and wide people saying that the Magic need a starting point guard in this upcoming draft when, in reality, they've A, already got Markelle Fultz, who has seen a resurgence, and B, have functioned pretty well just giving the ball to Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner. That's where Keontae George comes in. A stocky bucket getter who saw some ups and downs in his lone season with the Baylor Bears, George is a true tweener combo guard. He showcased a nice shooting stroke, solid off-ball scoring, and flashed real potential as a primary handler and playmaker at times with Baylor. I think he could really thrive off of Banchero, Wagner, and more, working to become a more consistent shooter and scorer, all while developing those lead guard duties for situational use in Orlando's weird, funky lineups. Orlando is not a traditional style team, and I don't think they need these traditional style guards. I like Key here. Drafting for the Toronto Raptors at number 13, I chose Jalen Hood-Schifino out of Indiana. He's actually not a prospect I have in my personal lottery, but he's close enough, and I think that he both fills a positional need for Toronto and is an intriguing enough fit that I would select him here. At 6'6" with great positional size, scorer's mentality, and decent passing chops, Hood-Schifino could be a solid replacement for the eventual departure of Fred VanVleet from Toronto. Truthfully, I don't see Hood-Schifino as some day one starter and producer, but I think Scotty Barnes could essentially take over point guard duties in the meantime, while Hood-Schifino learns to limit his turnovers, become more consistent as a scorer and shooter, and eventually plugs into this forward-heavy lineup to create even more mismatch nightmares for the Raptors. He's a pick-and-roll maestro, and when paired with the likes of Barnes, Pascal Siakam, Jakob Poeltl, I really think he'd thrive. Defensively, he's shown promise as a point-of-attack defender, and certainly wouldn't be a liability on that end. Again, I wouldn't necessarily call him a project pick, but he's not exactly a surefire bet either. I just think his upside as a jumbo point guard in the Raptors system is too interesting to pass on. Last pick here, New Orleans selecting Jordan Hawkins, 14th overall to cap off the lottery. Going with shooting here, because who doesn't want a little more shooting in the modern NBA? Pelicans have a pretty solid roster top to bottom. They've got forwards locked up in B.I., Zion, Trey Murphy. Valanciunas is a good value center. I really believe in Dyson Daniels as their point guard of the future. Herb Jones is an all-world defender. I like their pieces. But they finished middle of the pack, 15th overall in shooting this season. At 39% on a whopping 7.5 three-point attempts this season, Hawkins would be an immediate infusion of three-point prowess, catch and shoot, movement, you name it. He's incredibly active on the perimeter, is going to be a solid add for any team on draft night 2023. That is it for this one. Let me know what you thought. First mock draft. pretty unconventional, but we'll see how it turns out. Let me know what other kind of videos you want to see from me. Obviously, I have the heat check series, which I have a lot of fun doing. I have these, might do some big board type stuff, might do some more team specific type videos, but let me know what you want to see. I genuinely am curious on you guys' input, and we'll see you next time.